no classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties relating to sexual orientation or gender identity shall occur. Lady, you mentioned George Washington. Who is Martha Washington?
Take a look at this Republican being absolutely demolished by the text of her own bill.
His wife?
Under your bill, how could you mention that in a classroom?
So to me, that's not sexual orientation.
Really? So it's only really certain sexual orientations that you want prohibited from introduction in the classroom.
Do you have language to make that better, to make it where you're not talking?
Lady, I didn't introduce your bill.
Okay.
And I didn't write it. You wrote it, and so I'm asking what it means. Which sexual orientations do you believe should be prohibited from Missouri classrooms?
So this TikTok is absolutely amazing because it reveals what we really already know about Republicans, which is the simple fact that they do not think anything through. Fundamentally, Republicans don't take the 3 seconds to understand that any law that they create will have to apply to everybody, because that's how laws work. And in this instance, it's when it comes to sexual orientation, because they don't want anybody to learn about anybody's sexual orientation, because they just think children are too young to learn about those sorts of things. Except they forget that straight is a sexual orientation. Now think about that for a second. Fundamentally, these Republicans are revealing that they believe at a default that queer folks should be treated as second-class citizens. When they're talking about, oh, we shouldn't teach kids about gender identity, they're not saying that children should all use they, them pronouns and not really engage with the concept of gender until puberty or anything like that. They are saying, no, the existence of transgender people should be considered inherently subversive and wrong, and we should not allow people to even engage with the concept of being trans until much later in life. But they're totally fine with people being taught about gender identity. They're totally fine with people being taught heteronormativity. It's just that they don't want people to even know that queer people exist. They don't want people to know that trans people exist. They don't want people to know that gay people exist. Because mentioning that you have a wife if you are a cisgender man is revealing your sexual orientation. And yet these Republicans have no problem with that. Saying that somebody is a boy or a girl is to speak about gender identity.
You can believe something without putting that onto somebody by the way you behave. And you can have beliefs and morals and values that guide you through life.
I don't dispute that, but I'm asking about the language of your bill and how it would permit the mention of the historical figure Martha Washington. Could you explain that to me?
So why is she famous? Is she famous because she's married to George Washington?
It seems like that would be a relevant fact in her biography, yes. Could it be mentioned under the plain reading language of your bill? Is that a no?
I don't know, sir.
Okay.
You see, these Republicans think that they don't have a gender identity, but they actually do. It just so happens that with a lot of these Republicans, their gender identity aligns with the sex that they were assigned at birth, and hence they are cisgender. And yet, these right-wingers will get furious about the notion of just pronouns or the word cisgender. They'll insist that they don't have pronouns, even though literally everybody has pronouns. That's how pronouns work. They just want to reject the existence of queer people and force queer people into a second-class citizen status. And that is fundamentally what these bills are all about. We can see this clear as day. And the cold hard facts are, to any conservative that might be watching this, most people are fine with transgender people. I know, it's a wild concept, but most people actually don't care if somebody is trans because they're not busy thinking about what could possibly be in their pants all the time. They're actually mostly just wanting to get through their lives, and they recognize that it really doesn't matter what's in someone's pants unless you're in some sort of intimate relationship with them. But all of these efforts, like these bills that are coming from the Republicans, are part of a larger campaign to enforce under the law the belief that these conservatives have, that queer people should exist as second-class citizens, and trying to force queer people out of the public. I mean, quite literally, they want to make it effectively impossible to be a queer teacher, right? To be trans or to be gay as a teacher. They want to, in many ways, make it almost illegal to be trans in public. Like, for example, if you pass a drag bill where you define drag as a female impersonator and you equate female impersonation to being a literal stripper, well then all of a sudden, when you ban that from public, you're in many ways effectively banning trans people from public. Either directly, if you go with the broadest interpretation of the law and that is how it ends up being applied, or indirectly, by just creating pretense for people to arbitrarily call the police on random trans people just existing. And this is all part of this larger fascist agenda that these right-wingers are pushing. And it mostly centers around the fear that a lot of right-wing parents have that their children might not be treated as property. Because Republicans fundamentally think that children should be treated as property, as opposed to like just being treated as regular human beings who simply are young and need a little bit of guidance in life. No, they don't want children to have any autonomy whatsoever. And that's actually why it's perfectly compatible in their minds for Republicans to be pushing for child labor. At the same time, they're trying to say that it's impossible for children to know what their gender is. Because fundamentally, they want children to be the property of their parents. And in the mind of a conservative, you can of course send your property to go work for you, but your property is definitely not allowed to have any type of identity of themselves that's different than what you think it is. So a lot of this stuff that ends up getting framed as hypocritical among the Republicans is in actuality perfectly consistent. But what we really need to see from the Democratic Party right now are more statements like what this person is saying. We need more people going out and explicitly calling out how absurd the claims that Republicans are making right now is. I mean, because think about it. These people are unironically running around trying to claim that being trans is a mental illness. Not only did they used to say that about being gay, but also, think about it for like 3 seconds. These Republicans, unironically, are running around saying that they think being a woman or being a man is a mental illness. That is what they're saying when they say being trans is a mental illness. They are quite literally making the argument that being a woman is a mental illness, which is just deeply, deeply absurd. And they're also running around pretending like the existence of trans people is gonna fundamentally undermine Western civilization. And like, I don't know, you're watching this video right now, does it seem like I'm undermining Western civilization just by being trans? I don't know. You tell me in the comments, I guess. But fundamentally, just this hyperbolic fear-mongering is part of a larger campaign among these right-wingers to really galvanize their ridiculous base around an issue, because fundamentally Republicans have no real issues that are popular. And even though attacking queer people is deeply, deeply unpopular, it's still at least a little bit more popular than cutting taxes for rich people and giving giant handouts to massive corporations. Because of course, if Republicans ran on things like gutting Social Security, they wouldn't get any votes at all. So instead they play this game of feeding into the insecurities of an unhinged base of right-wingers and fueling all of this hatred against queer people, all in an effort to both strip away the rights of women and children and also at the same time distract from the fact that these Republicans want nothing more than for incredibly wealthy individuals to rob working class people blind.